Okay, right, welcome aboard everybody. And what we're going to do today is have a look at the cold start process for the A320 on Microsoft Flight Simulator. And it's quite a detailed tutorial, and to some extent it's still work in progress. So there's a little bit to do on it to fine tune it, but it's at a stage where I think it's reasonably solid. So I just wanted to kind of get it out there, and hopefully it helps someone else kind of figure this out from cold start, because it's caused me a couple of kind of stressful evenings trying to get to a point where I understood exactly what was happening and how to do it. So what we're going to do is take a SimBrief flight plan. So we're going to create the flight plan, and we're going to follow a checklist and do the weight and balance and get to the point where we take off. So how are we going to do this? So let me just talk you through the kind of structure of doing this, and then hopefully you can follow this through at another time, and it will make sense as well. Okay, so over on the right hand side of the screen then is basically a checklist. So this is on the website but not quite available yet, and what this does, it takes us through the whole kind of process from start to finish. That said, it's work in progress as well. So I can't stress enough that it needs fine tuning, but it's at a point where it sort of makes sense. So what we have is, this is just generally description where it describes all the things that you come across in the checklist. And the idea is, as you go through the checklist, is to press the button to say that you've done this bit, and you can gradually then work your way through knowing that you've done everything you need to do. So we're going to go through from flight planning and the whole essence of kind of, where are you going and what time are you going, all that kind of thing. And then we'll go through the SimBrief flight planning route. We'll look at Cockpit Preparation Part 1, the MCD you initialize, and getting the actual flight plan into SimBrief, into the MCDU from SimBrief. And then we'll look at the Cockpit Preparation Part 2 for takeoff, and then MCDU SimBrief flight plan import, and then the MCDU weight and balance, engine start, pre-taxi and taxi, and takeoff and climb out. So that's basically what we're looking to do. Right, let's actually just have a look at basically what we need to do from the start. So before we start to fly, we need to think about where we're going to go and what the basic information is. So let's just have a think about that for a minute. And what I do to do that is to make a note of these things, my flight plan before I go. And it just helps me kind of figure out basically what I'm looking to do. So let's start to fill in some of this information. So my airline today is going to be BA, and it's the 24th of January, and it's going to be a 10:55 flight. Now, I think it's important to point out that some of the information that's in this video and the bits that are in the checklist have changed since I actually took some of the screenshots. So bear with me with that, but in essence, it'll still be the same. So my flight number is going to be, let's call this 7055. That's an actual flight number, and then that for BA down to Madrid. So then we're going to have a FIN number of 3201, 321. That doesn't really matter. I think the FIN number is basically a manufacturer's or airline's number where they can identify aircraft on the apron, that kind of thing. So my Atc Callsign is going to be a combination of the airline and the flight number. So our Atc Callsign will be BA 7055, and the registration, I've decided to call it GFest now, but that doesn't really matter too much for now. So, and then a couple of other bits that we've got to fill in, and excuse me. So on the checklist, and this is a downloadable thing as well, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that. I think I can do something where you download it on something called Gumroad, but we'll figure that out. So this is now a green part. So this is this part here, and then the pink part is the arrival. So departure and arrival, and then all this information here, I just write down as this is the flight, this is the aircraft configuration, this is departure information, and this is arrival here. And then down here, I've got the alternate and that kind of thing as well. So let's start to just fill in here where we're going to actually be going. So we're going to be leaving from EGLL, and we are going to LEMD, which is Madrid. Okay, so far so good. Right, so the next part of the checklist is to get ourselves over to SimBrief and do that part. So what we need to do here, let's just pull this bit up here if I can as well. Hopefully you can see that. So we're going to follow the checklist through on the right hand side in doing this. So what we want to do, we want to be in dispatch, and we want to be in basically new flight plan, which is everything we need to focus on is either colored red if it's just one thing, or multicolored if it's more things to do, and then we just check it off the tick list as we go. So what we want to click here is new flight. Well, we've done that, but let's just click it anyway, just so that we can. And okay, and then as we scroll down, the next thing we want to do is these items in the checklist. So you've got the screenshot above, and then we need to follow the checklist below. So what we want to do, our airline is going to be BA, and so we can actually mark that as done. Our flight number is going to be 7055, so we can pop that in now. So this is all information, obviously, that we've worked out and we've made a note of before we start. So let's just go back to our checklist and we can mark the flight number down. So we need to enter the departure next, which is EGLL, which is Heathrow. And so we can mark that as done. And we now need to enter the arrival, which is Madrid. So that's LEMD. Okay, right, so what that's done now, and yeah, so we've done that, and we now need to select the date. So it's actually going to be in the past, just because I did this on the 24th of January, some of the basic stuff. So selected the date, so that's different when you read this tutorial, as I'm saying there, and then we need to select the departure time. So this flight, the real flight in real life, actually goes at 10:55. So we'll pop that in just to make it as real as we can. So we've entered the time, so we can now work our way down. So we want to select the airframe now. So we want the A320, and so there's a couple of anomalies as we work past this. You can, I believe, open the aircraft editor and bring in a better configuration for the A320NX, which is what we're talking about here, for this aircraft. But I haven't done that. So we're going to work with the A320-200, and when we come to do the weight and balance, I think it's better to put in the A319, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, so we've done that, and let's go back to our checklist, and the airframe is done. So let's enter the registration next. So we've done this top bit, we've entered the airframe, and now we need to enter the registration. So we're going to be called, slightly different to the instructions there, but we're going to be called G-Fest today, for obvious reasons, Pilot Fest. And the fin number, now we can go back to our kneeboard because we made a note of the fin number, and it's going to be 3201. And say this doesn't really matter too much because it's more of a kind of airline number anyway, but A320 number 1 is what I've got there. Okay, and you can see that the Atc Callsign is actually done as well. Right, let's tick off the enter the fin number, and we've entered the registration number. Right, okay, so a little bit of information there. So when the checklist is actually available, there's much more to kind of look at there. So we've now entered the flight details, so we can tick that. Okay, so this is at a basic level, and what it's given us is some additional information here. So what we can do is generate the flight plan now. Okay, so that's this button here. So it's I think that's OFP is operational flight plan. Not absolutely sure, but let's run with that for now. So we can generate the operational flight plan. That will overwrite the previous flight plan. So in SimBrief, from my understanding, there's one current flight plan that is the live flight plan in effect. And that's, you can't have multiple live flight plans, I believe. I stand to be corrected on that. So, okay, so we've done that, and we've got a whole bunch of other information now. So let's just tick our list that says flight plan generated. Okay, so what we now need to do is make a note of some of the other bits and pieces from the flight plan. Okay, so what we do is scroll down here, and we basically have a lot more information available to us. So if we scroll down to this page, and this tells us some of the information that we need to have. So let's make a note of that, because we'll need that later. So we've got 178 passengers and 0 cargo. So what we want to do, let's just go back to our kneeboard, because we're going to make a note of these things, or a piece of paper if that's how you've got yours. That doesn't really matter. Right, so we need to make a note of payload, which is 18.6, and the payload and the 0 fuel weight, which is going to be 62.4, and that's of 62.5. Oh, sorry, don't need to write that in there. And then the fuel is 8.2 of 8.8. The takeoff weight is 70.3, and that's of 71. So we're pretty well loaded today, judging by this. And the landing aircraft weight is 65.4, and that's of 66. So she's going to be a heavy beast today. So this is all good stuff. So we've now got that. And we can see, if we go look at we have a look at the things we've got to write down, we can see we've got an alternate now from the flight plan. So our alternate, it's probably best to make a note of this, because this is where you would quickly find this information. So we've got payload, 0 fuel weight, and forget that, because that's the center of gravity, which we'll work out later. And the numbers on the screen are slightly different, as I say, because the aircraft is just different when you calculate it each time. And so that's good. And now if we go back to the top of our plan, we can see, yeah, we just check this date, the time. That's good. Yeah. And just have a scroll through and just familiarize yourself with some of the information here. So, so what we don't have, takeoff fuel, we've got that. So what we're going to do, the alternate route is that. So if we go to our route ID, we can see, so this is the routing, this part here. So what we then need to make a note of, as it's here, is the runway, basically. So, sorry, let me just go back to SimBrief. I've been looking at the screen and you've not been seeing it. So sorry, I've scrolled down here, and just to recap, this is where you get the weights and balance from here, or the weights, the weight information is there. And then the routing basically gives you the essence of the flight plan. But there's a couple of bits of information we want. We want to know which runway we'll be taking off from. So we can then go back to our piece of paper and just jot that down. So it's going to be 27R, and we'll be arriving back at 18 right. at Madrid. So we can pop that in, and of course by the time you get there, it might actually have changed, and you might be looking to arrive at a different runway. So we've made a note of 18 right there for our actual runway. Okay, so let's just go back and see what else we need to make a note of. So there's a couple of other things. So if we go down the list then, so we've got payload, zero fuel weight, fuel, takeoff weight, landing aircraft weight, and so top of climb and information. So basically we haven't done that. So we need to just find that. So let's just go back to our SimBrief plan and scroll down. So if you scroll down, you start to get to the part which is flight log. And what that will do is tell you TOC. So you need to look out for TOC, which will be somewhere here. There you go. Okay, so this is the airway that you'll be on and the top of the climb, which is there. Okay, so TOC is, where are we? There you go. Right, so it will be, I think that's 35,000 feet, 350, and it will be minus 59 will be the temperature, because you'll need that. So basically we go back to our notepad and we make a note of this. So we're going to be at 350 for the top of the climb, and so this is basically on the way out, the departure. So here we would put 350 and it's minus 59, and all this becomes relevant when we get on in a minute and we have to do the actual flight plan part. So okay, so we've got EGLL, and of course it says 09 left there, but of course it's different today because it's calculated different. So what you then can do is download the actual flight plan itself. So how we do this, when you scroll down, let's take it back to SimBrief. So we're currently in the actual window that you scroll around here to find the information, and basically when you scroll down you'll be presented with this download tool, but what you want to do is just download the files manually in effect. And what you'll do is scroll down until you find Flight Simulator 2020, and that's what you'll click to download the flight plan. I'm not going to do that, but you can, because you'll perhaps need that to refer to. Right, okay, flight plan downloaded. So we're actually progressing. It's obviously taking a bit of time, but this whole thing does take a bit of time, fortunately and unfortunately. So now we're going to do cockpit preparation, part 1 and part 2. So, right, let's do this bit. We're now in the cockpit, and what we want to do is start doing some of the things. So the first thing on the checklist is the engine master switches are off. Right, so that's the first thing we need to do. So this is the engine master switch. These are off, so we can confirm that. So we can go back to and confirm that. Engine mode selector, which is this switch here, that is set to normal, as the checklist says. So we do that normal. Landing gear lever is set down. Landing gear lever is set down. Okay, so now we need to do some of the stuff in the overhead. So what we'll do now is scroll up to the overhead, and we'll work our way through this kind of process here. So you can see that each colored check shows you exactly where you need to be looking. So let's do the first one, wipers. That's this switch here. We can tell that because of the picture. So we want to make sure that ours is off, and so is the co-pilot. And I believe the reason we do this is just to make sure that if there's sand and stuff on the window, it doesn't scratch the window and all that kind of stuff. But both need to be off. So check, both wipers are off. Battery voltage greater than or equal to 25. Look, you know, do I know exactly what I'm doing here? No, not quite. But we're just, at this point, we need to check the battery voltage. So we're going to do that. Check. batteries 1 and 2 are on, so they're already on. You can tell this because when you switch, the off comes on, and you don't want any of that in effect. Let's just turn those back off. Okay, so are on, and it says the next one is to check is ground power available, and you'll see this avail in effect. So ground power is available, so we'll wait for that. And so we've checked that, and now what we want to do is do the external power. So this is, you can see the green switch there, so we can press external power because it's available. And let me just yeah, okay, so that now says that's done. So external power, sorry, just needed to put my headset on for a moment. So external power is on. So now we want to do the Apu Fire Test. So if we look at the picture, that's the yellow one up at the top there. So let's do the Apu Fire Test. And we should get the notifications for that. And in the list it tells you what you're actually looking for. You will see the discharge, and then on the Ecam you'll also see Apu Fire as well. And so that's that. So we've done that, so that's jolly good. And now we want to do Apu Master on. So let's have a look where that is. That's down here, and it's that one there. So Apu Master is on. Let's go back to the checklist and tap that. Apu Master is on. So you have to wait just a little bit to for everything to kind of get going. So it's basically a count. I think you can, in essence, go to the back of the aircraft, I believe, and have a look and see whether the actual flap is open on the aircraft. And I'm not, it's somewhere. I think it's there. I'm not totally sure. But in essence, that's what you're looking for at that point. Okay, so Apu Master is on. So next one on the checklist is Apu Start. So I should have done that first. Apu Start. Jolly good. Right, so now we're looking at, in essence, the lights. And a lot of this is down to personal preference. So, but what we'll do, we'll go through doing the lights. So you can see what we do is go round and set up the primary flight display lights. So I'm going to put these all maximum at this point. So that's a primary flight display done. And navigational lights are done. And then up here, I think we have lights here that we can turn on to brighten things up, just to keep things nice and bright there. And then we can go down to the Ecam, and basically the upper and lower Ecam. So let's just go back up and have a look. That's these two here. That's now done. So let's go back to our checklist. Up cam, upper, up cam. So Ecam lower. Floodlights as required. I think that's up in the top. So I haven't actually marked where they are, so because these are just kind of by personal preference. So floodlights you can change. The lower integrated lights, which are the floodlights, sorry, here. So you can turn all those on there, and the integrated lighting as well. So that really is pretty much those done. There we go. So that's the lights done. We are progressing reasonably well. Sorry, this is quite a long video, but hopefully it's relatively interesting. So we're now getting into the meat and the bones of this. So now on the checklist, what we need to do, parking brake is on. So let's have a look. Parking brake is set and is on. Check. Flaps are up. 0. Check. Speed brake is basically, there we go. I don't know why that doesn't sound right. No white marker tape is available. So is disconnected. So that's where that needs to be at this stage. I believe that doesn't feel quite right, but anyway. So back upstairs, I think Captain Canada, I watched a few things from Captain Canada, and he calls this upstairs when you go upstairs, which I really kind of quite liked. And bear with me just a second. Right, okay, so now we're back on the overhead, and we need to do the probe window heat, which is here, so we can have a look on the checklist on the right there. So the probe window heat is done, so, and that's the pitot heat probe, I believe, and nav and logo lights are on. So that's this one here. Nav and logo lights are on. APU bleed, and so this basically this shows downstairs in the Ecam if that's actually on. So that one is the APU bleed here, so we need to press that one. APU bleed is on. Good. Okay, so now what we need to do, still in the overhead, we need to work our way through this panel. And in essence, you go, I think it's bottom to top, left to right. So we'll do 3 sections. And the first thing we need to do is check the cockpit oxygen is on. So that is crew oxygen supply was shown off. It's now on. And it always seems a bit odd to me that the on position on these things is with nothing showing, which doesn't feel kind of quite right. So right, so we come across a cockpit recording ground control and all that kind of thing, and where you come across that kind of ziggy-zaggy yellow and black thing, that shows that it's not actually working or functioning. So okay, so now what we need to do is switch on the ADRIS, which is the navigation receivers, I believe. So what we do is we do these, we've got to do 1, 2 and 3, but actually it's 1, 2 and 3. So they don't go left to right, 1, 2, 3. It's 1 over to the right and then back to the middle. So let's do that. So we can turn that to nav, nav and nav. Okay, back to our checklist. We can now mark those off as done. And now what we need to do is go to the overhead middle. So strobe light, which is the red one there, we can see is set to auto. Strobe light set to auto. No smoking is set to auto. Check. And seatbelts are where are we? No smoking is auto. That's right. And seatbelts are on. Okay. So emergency exit arm we need to do next. Let's just have a look at the picture, keep that in where that should be. So we're now looking to do the lime green one, which is over here. So emergency exits are on arm. And then we can test the lights, this is annunciator lights. So in effect, what this is doing is showing us that everything works in the top there. So you see everything lights up and you think, oh my goodness, I've actually turned everything on, but that's not the case. You're just checking to see whether the lights actually work. So that's good. And there you go, quite like that, that's good. And then, so we can check annunciator lights are done. Dome lights set to dim. So the dome lights are next to the, there you go. And the dome lights again are above, and that kind of lights up the whole top part here. So we'll have that set to dim. So that's that done. Okay, so now we're moving further up the middle section. And what we want to do now is to set anti-icing is off. So again, you know, in its correct state, I guess here, it off is what you would think is on because it's not showing anything. So basically, we're checking that is off. Anti-icing is off. Engines 1 and 2 again set to off. And cabin pressure mode selector. So we're now looking for the green one, which is cabin pressure mode selector is set off, not manual. So basically that's what we want, it to be dark like that. So that's good. And now we go on to the ditching button, which is over here, and that needs to be closed, which it is closed. Hopefully we don't ever need to use that. And then we now have the landing elevation, which is set to auto. Right, so that I believe is set to auto at that point. Again, there's a couple of things I'm really not sure about. Well, it's more than a couple of things. There's a lot of things I'm really not sure about in this, but I think that's right. Now, Aircon, which is this section, let's just go back to our picture so that you can see it. So we are looking for this item on the bottom, which is in purple, currently unticked, and that's those items there. So we need to set the aircon, and currently it's set as normally they're right low on cold and dark, but so you can set those, and the temperatures actually show up in the Ecam below. So right, set that as done. Right, let's do the overhead upper middle, and first thing we want to do is check that the packs are on. So basically, there you go, that's off again, so we know that anything where there's no light is on. So we're looking at these two, the packs, and they are on. Fuel pumps all on, so these are the fuel pumps here, so they are on because they're off, if that makes sense. And then we want to do the fire test on engine 1, so let's do that now. There we go, check, done. And we're looking for the same thing for discharge, and you would see down below in the Ecam the fire alert showing there as well, but you can't actually see it at this stage. So okay, so that's the engine test is done, and a couple of things. Crossbleed we can't do, cargo heat select as required. Right, so then the last thing we're doing here is that on the electrical panel is just actually checking, does it all look all right? Is there anything that doesn't look out of place? So we've just seen that these warnings here have started to disappear, and that's probably because the navigation is starting to come alive. That takes about 8 minutes from when you set it up here, so you need to make sure you get that done. So electrical panel is good, ventilation panel is good, and no white or amber lights, check. So look over the board, and there's no white or amber lights, so we're in a good position right now. I just need to have a sip of my tea. Okay, so far so good. Right, on we go. Ecam Pages. So what we now do is go down to have a look at our Ecam Pages, and in effect, let's just get this right. So probably there. So what we want to do is have a look at RCL, which is here. So we hit that, and so TCAS nav is not ready yet, and some of these don't actually work at the moment. So let's have a look at door. Okay, so that's the doors. We can see that's right, and we can now look at hydraulics. Nothing there at the moment, so we can tick that off. And engine oil. So basically, where are we? Engine, and we can see we're checking the oil quantities here, and I think I've watched a few other people's videos, and apparently 25 is way too high, but that's the bit that we're actually checking at this point. So let's tick off engine oil is checked, and then we want to check flight controls, and we're looking for all the obvious things here. The speed brakes all okay, and the rudder trim is where it should be, and everything seems fine. I don't really know 100% what I'm looking for, if I'm honest, but what we can say is we've checked it. Right, now we are now going to move down to look at the MCDU. So it starts to get a bit more involved here. So what we're going to do is move down the screen here to this part. So what we do is we click the MCDU, and so then we mark that there, and we then go to options on the right. Okay, done that, and now in options on the right we now need to go to AOC. Check, done. Scroll up. We now need to go to SimBrief. So this is the part where we're actually putting in our user information. Now I've done that, Pilot Fest, so that's all there ready to go. So let's just scroll down. Oh, I should really just say that when it says, so to click the SimBrief part, as I've just done, it then says next to it to LSK5, and that's the key 5 that we have to press, which I pressed previously. And if it was 5 on the right hand side, so they're number 1 to 6 on the sides. If it was the button on the right hand side, it would be LSK5R as an example. So it's the same number, but they just put an R next to it. So we've done that in effect. Okay, so we're moving on a little bit here because I've actually done some of this entering the username already. So we enter the username, so we would type in on the keyboard here, Pilot Fest, or whatever your username is, and then, so enter on the keypad, and then we would hit LSK2 and press enter. So that is now done. Now what we do is press return, which is LSK6. There you go. Right, so preparation part 2. So what we've now done, we've done some of the basic cockpit preparation, and we've set up our MCDU to receive the flight plan from SimBrief, which we'll get to that in a minute. And yeah, so that's right. So we've done that. So sorry about all the ums and ahs, but I'm doing this live, and there's quite a lot to actually get through. So what we're going to do here is pop in the rest of the information, do the rest of the preparation in the cockpit. So right, let's go up to the cockpit here, and basically the next step is to set the barometer, so we can see over on the right hand side in the checklist there. So we need to set whether we want to have hectopascals or inches. So we'll have QNH, which is the hectopascals. You do that by clicking this small part here. And so we'll have a QNH because we fly mostly in England. So right, set that, and that's the kind of measurement. And then to set the actual pressure, you press B on the keyboard, and that will actually bring in the current pressure. So flight director, and you can see now the navigation's come alive, so that's all kicked in nicely. Now what we want to do is set the flight director here, and you'll then see that basically you have the flight director information that's come up, which is there, the CMAP, and you see we have 1 of 1 so far, 1 FD1. What we also want to do is make sure that basically the flight director for the co-pilot is pressed as well, so then you get that 1 of 2 in effect. Okay, so that's that done. Now what we want to also make sure that we've done, if I just get a forward on view of that, I think we might look a bit better. There we go. So what we need to do is make sure that this is pressed. So this is CSTR, this is constraints. What that will show you in the flight plan when we get to that part is any constraints with any of the waypoints, as well as all the other waypoint information as well. So we need to do that. So constraints are on. Good stuff. Right, now we want to set, we've got two bits up here that we need to think about. We've got the navigation display setting, what do you want to display in it, and what do you want to display in terms of range. So you need to set what you want. Normally we're between flight plan and arc, but what we'll set is arc here, so it's already set on arc, so we can tick that off as done. And what we'll do is have the 10 nautical miles set here, and you can see if you move it, the range changes on the display below, but we'll keep 10 because we need to keep an eye on what's actually happening fairly close to the aircraft during takeoff. And these buttons, the VOR, ADF, you kind of set as required, so that's probably for another day on that. And the ILS landing system in effect is set to off, so we don't want that selected right now. That's something we would use when we get closer to the destination, that kind of thing. Okay, so we're now looking at the flight, basically the flight control unit, which is this part here. So we want speed to be managed, and what we're saying here is that you should see the dashes and dot here on both, because what that means is that's autopilot computer managed in effect. So we see that on heading and altitude increments, either 100s or 1000s. So the way you do that is by clicking here in this part, if you can, and you can see that moving back and forth there. So it's just on that rim of there. Normally that's used at 1000. So we've set the increments, that's done. And then what we'll look at setting here is the initial kind of stop altitude. So for example, it might be 8,000. So we would set that, and we would refer to the flight plan for that, but we're not going to do that today, other than just know that you need to set the first stop height. So, and then that the computer knows basically where it's going. Right, so the initial stop height is set. Let's move on. Okay, so now over on the left-hand side, over here, we need to set the brightness. So we've done this pretty much when we did the setup for the screens anyway. So the screen always looks a bit darker than what I'm used to it looking, but anyway, it's what it is. So we can say PFD and navigation display brightness set as required. Good. So, and what we then do is basically check these displays just to make sure whether anything is untoward. Well, what are we looking for? We know that we're set for the nav, and basically our height, our initial stop height is 8,000 feet, and our QNH is set at 1013, and we have our range set to the smallest, which is 10. So that's good. So that's basically what we would be checking at that point. So okay, that's a PFD and navigation display checked. Right, so now we go down to the middle console, and there's a couple of things that we need to check here. So this is a standby display in effect, and when we come alive, this is in effect it's not very bright, so we need to bring that to life, and we would make sure that the altimeter is reading the same. This is a separate system, so this is 1013 29.92, so we know that's reading correct, so we can tick that off as well. Well, there's parity between the two instruments. And the artificial horizon, so we can see that that's set and it's level at the moment, and we're actually reading 80 feet, which is what we are, because we're 80 feet off the ground, or I think it's 83 at Heathrow, but I'm not totally sure. And you basically set the clock to what you would want that to be. So we're not going to do anything with the clock. We are just going to say that we are happy that it's set. Right, okay, and the next thing we need to do is we check that the anti-skid system is set on, so that's push up. And on the checklist you can see, hopefully there's a little arrow there which shows what you should actually be looking to do. So I see what a spelling mistake there. So now we're going to go down to the audio panel and do some settings there. So in effect, oh, that doesn't look quite right. Let's have a look here. There we are. So in the audio panel, we would want to make sure that VHF is checked. Oh, sorry, I need to check the anti-skid. Done that now. So transmit buttons are checked, and the receiver buttons are checked as well. So that's that done. We now go down to the weather radar, which is here, just down below. And we can't set the wind shear at the moment, but we can set the weather mode, which is this one here, to weather, so or WX. So it's got a slight notch in it there. So that's how you want to set that one. So that's done. And we then go to the back in the center display again. So we need to go back here and come down. And what we want to do here is press STS, which is, there you go. So this is our status. So we can see TCAS is inoperative. And what we're looking for on STS should be normal. We normally have a normal in there. but I think that's because we haven't set the TCAS yet. So, okay, so we'll run with that. So we'll check that, and we then press cycle as well. So press cycle, which is press. Sorry, there you go. My own instructions. So you've got status selected, and then you basically, I know you haven't, you just cycle your way through just to look at the other settings. So that's the last check on there. Right, so now we're looking, and we're progressing. I know it's taken a bit of time, but hopefully you're finding this interesting in some way. But now we need to start to have a look at some of these are the safety checks before we actually start the aircraft. So let's just go back over here, and we can have a good look down here. So you can see what we need to do is make sure that the throttles are actually set idle. So let's scroll just to make sure that that's a setting there. And yeah, so the throttle is set as idle. That's what we're looking for there. Jolly good. So we can tick that off. Right, engine master switches are both off. That's these switches here. Engine mode selector is normal. So the mode selector is still normal. It's not unusual to come across having to do these things twice as you work your way through. Parking brake, check. On or off and back on. Check. So the gravity extension gear is stowed. That's this bit here, the gravity extension. Basically, if the landing gear fails, you can pull this, and gravity brings the landing gear down. But that doesn't work, I don't think. So that's marked out on the checklist as hashed out because it doesn't work. So ATC we would now set. As I say, that's probably the detail that we're not going into at the moment, is to set the actual comms there. So let's just jump up to the top and have a look, see if we've got ATC. What I don't want, let's have a look. Right, so we will need ground, and so we ground services we will need. So we'll set that for now. Okay, and right, let's get back to where we were. We were doing basically the safety checks in this section of the mid console. So ATC, we can mark that as set, and the weather system, we're looking for this blue rectangle there, is set to 1. So that's arrow left that we need to set to 1 on the weather system on the checklist. Done. Right, we're actually progressing. So now let's go to bringing in the SimBrief flight plan into the actual system itself. So I'm just gonna pour myself just a little bit of water, and I'll be back with you. Okay, so back with you now. So what we're going to do is work our way through setting up the MCDU for the flight. So as you can see, we now need to press ATSU. So let's just get positioned to do that. ATSU. So we need to press the MCDU again to get us back to where we need to be. We then need to press selector key 2, which is ATSU. So we've done that. Check. Move on to the next part of the checklist. Now we need to press AOC menu. Check. Done. Now we need to press LSK1. Done. Check. Move up. Now we're going to request the data, and what this will do is request our flight plan from SimBrief. Look at that, that's fantastic, isn't it? So that's actually done that. Check, we've done that. Now what we want to do here is just have a look at the data, just to see what's going on there. So it's you know, it's as expected. So Heathrow to LEMD, and there's our flight number as well. So this is all good stuff. So we can now tick off imported data, check. Right, so next thing we need to do is press init, which I believe is initialize. So check that. And this is going well so far, but it's got all the potential of going wrong. So if we'd have looked at the flight plan, we would have seen that the basics of the flight plan would have been there. And I was making a mistake for some time because I couldn't actually find the parts of the flight plan that all the airways and all that kind of thing just weren't there. So what you then need to do is press LSK2R, which is this one. There you go. So did you see some extra information was actually brought into the picture there? And if we scrolled, so we've pressed that. And what we now do is press, oh, did that work? Yeah, there you go. It didn't work actually. So it's good to check that. So that's what that check's all about, is to make sure that the data actually came in. So you can see that the data did actually come in there as well. So what we can then do is go to the next bit, which is MCDU. Check, done. And now we're going to do the weight and balance. Now this really had me caught for quite some time. So load SimBrief flight plan. Turn primary. Okay, yeah. So let's go back to where we were. It's very easy to get lost. And right, so we want to press ATSU. So we've done the MCDU, pressed ATSU, and now back in here, which is the AOC menu. Hopefully you're following along with this. It's quite a lot to actually take in. And now we're doing performance, weight and balance, which is LSK4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Press that. Now, what we can do is load the fuel. So now what we need to press is send the request for the fuel. Good. Done. And now press load. Right, now that will have loaded the fuel, and this will all make sense. So what have we got there? So what we now want to do is press the next page. Okay, sorry, I skipped past that. So the next page is that arrow that's highlighted in effect, it's this arrow here, which you want to actually be pressing. This arrow here. So let's press that. And now we scroll down, we're on the payload page. So you can see payload there, and payload, which is in the screen here. So, sorry, I can check that off as done, and we come down to payload. Now, this is a bit tricky because it basically, it doesn't load the payload. So you have to actually go in and do the payload. So what we're going to do is, to make sure that the aircraft is loaded as we want, we're going to go into, if you follow the instructions down here, into the payload and into here. Now we can go back to our basically our sheet that we had, which was here. So we know that the payload is 18.6 and the fuel is 8.2. So let's work on this. Let's have a look at this. Let's go back to the screen. So there we are. Right. So so the payload is 18.6. Now I'll show you what I do with this. I select basically, I select this, the pilot, and make it 0. I select, double click on co-pilot, make that 0. Business class, double click, 0. Forward baggage. Now, what I put in here is half of the payload. So that will be 18.6 will be 9.3. So put 9300, and you can see the center of gravity is way out. So what we'll do is go to economy class and hit 0, and now put 9300 into the rear baggage, and you can see what's happened. Look, is the actual center of gravity has basically come to where we would expect it to be. So that's safe to fly. Now what we need to do is do the fuel. So the fuel, we need, the fuel weight was 8.2. So we can use the slider for this and get this as close as we can. So we can we can do a similar thing as to what we did before, but I don't really do that with this. I just get it as close as, really, to be honest. There you go, 8.193. So that's pretty much 8.2. Now, what we need to do here is make a note of this, which is center of gravity, which is 22.74. So we go back to our piece of paper and make a note of the 0 fuel center of gravity, which is 22.74. Okay, right, let's go back to our checklist, and we can see that we've done the forward baggage, half in the forward, half in the rear baggage. And what we can now do is go to back to where we want to be, come out of that, and we go back to our MCDU, and you can see that we're still where we want to be here. And what we now need to do, I think we press init now, and we can go press init, follow the instructions, and we need to go to the right. So that's this button here. Done. And we now need to in effect, what we're going to do is enter the 0 fuel weight and the 0 fuel center of gravity. So we want to enter this. There you go. So you can see that we're 59.7, and that's what the 0 fuel weight is, and it's copied our 22.7. So that brings it into the display there by clicking that, and you can see that we highlight that it's actually come into the display in the instructions on the right there. So now what we do is enter it again. There you go. Okay, so this is good. That's done. And now, so that's entered. And what we now do is the fuel planning. So we now press LSK3 on the right hand side. Can you see that? Is that up far enough? There you go. There, sorry. Oh no, too far ahead. That is what we want. So on this screen, we want to press fuel planning. And so you click it once, and it's going to ask you to confirm it. So now what you do is confirm it. Done. Okay, so there we go. And some of these numbers will change as you go along. What's my confidence factor that all this is accurate? I'm not even sure the whole system works right, but as a process, at least we're working our way through in a structured manner to see where we are. Okay, so that's good. And now what we do is go back to our notes, and we can see that we our 0 fuel weight is 59.7. So that's different to what it was. So am I sure why this all changes? No, not really, if I'm brutally honest. So our 0 fuel weight is now 59.7, and our takeoff weight is now 67.6. This will all make sense in a minute. Okay, right, so we can now keep going. Now what we're going to do now is go to an online resource to actually do the calculation for the for working out the percentage for that we need, which is going to be the flex temperature in effect. So okay, we're now on this utility, which is wabpro.cz/320, and we now have all the information that we need to figure this out. So basically, there's some discussion, I believe, about whether the A319 is best or the A320. We're going to use the A320, and we're going to take it as it is. So the first thing we need to do is select the A320. So we've done that, aircraft type selected. We now need to enter the engines, which are CFMs. That's already highlighted. And we're going to have metric because we can. And now we need to put in the departure airport. So that's EGLL. And we then press METAR. And what that will do is call in the most recent METAR and weather information for what we need. Okay, so now we come down here. So flaps are set at 1F, check. Packs are set off, and anti-ice is off. You might change some of these for your own personal use, but it will give you some idea. And the runway is dry, so we've done that. And we want the takeoff weight now. So so we now need to look, where do we put takeoff weight? So that's the yellow one. So we need to put the takeoff weight in here. So this is our new takeoff weight, which is 67.6. That's 67,600 goes in here. Now the Mach percentage, which was the basically the center of gravity, is the 22.7 that we had. So we now need to pop in there 22.7. So okay, right, so now we need to takeoff weight is done, zero fuel weight is done, and now we need to enter the runway. So again, you know why it's so important to have your knee pad or some form of note in this, because you need to keep going back to it. So we're actually going to be taking off on 27 right, okay? So that gives us that information. So we've entered the runway. Right, so now we need to calculate. Oh, these speeds are high. We'll take that as it is. So now we need to go back again to our list here, and we need to fill in a bit more of the information that we now have. So excuse me, just move the camera down there. So let's just have a look. So we have got, let's go back to our display just to show us what we have. So it's telling us that the flaps will be, where are we? Flaps. Are plus 1.3 up, and the stabilator will leave as is. Don't worry about that. The flex is going to be 67 degrees for the temperature, and our speeds are 162, 163, and 163. So we now have those bits and pieces as well. Right, let's go back. So we pressed calculate. We've got the flex, we've got the V1, V2, and V3. So far, so good. And we've got the stab trim as well, stabilator trim. Okay, so we now need to go back to our, basically, the MCDU. And looking at our instructions, we need to press perf, which is performance, press performance. Right, now, check, done. So we're in takeoff mode, and we now need to press the flaps for this. So for this, we press 1 on the keypad. So we press 1 on the keypad, and we press enter, and you can see that flaps has been entered in there. Okay, so we've done that. Now we need to put in the basically the flap settings there for this, so, or the trim settings for this. So this is a little bit tricky and took me ages to figure this out. So we need to put in 1.3 up, which has been calculated for our weight. Now the way we do this, you might need to press clear a couple of times. What we do is we put / which is going to be this break between the two numbers here, and then we need to put in, you can see there, the letters up, U, P, okay, and then you put in the value, so 1.3, and then again, we've done that, values from last step, keypad, we put in the values, and then we press the third one down, which is this one. There you go, and you can see that because you had that slash there, it's actually entered that value where it should be. There we go. So we've now got the stabilator written in. So right, so we now need to enter the flex temperature. So we have that. We made a note, of course, on our notepad. So we're going to pop that in as 67 on the number pad here, and pop that into the flex temp. Perfect. Okay, we can trim data. We've done. We've seen that now showing, which is in the box there, and we have entered the flex temperature, and that's done. Now this is quite straightforward. We just need to enter the speeds, so V1 and V2. So this is, if you press this, actually it will calculate it, but my experience is that's not the same as the weight and balance calculator that we use. So we're going to stick with the weight and balance calculator. So 163, we clear that, 162, and enter. These speeds seem quite high, but let's just, for the purpose of the exercise, let's go with it. There we go, enter, and 162, enter. Okay. So let's go back to the checklist so we can tick those off as all done. And actually, so that's not quite right, because the V2 speed was actually V2 and VR and V2 speeds were 163. So let's get this right. 163 goes in there, and 163 goes in there. Okay, good stuff. Right, so now we're now at engine start, which is all very exciting stuff. It hasn't taken too long, really, has it? Just when you think about it. Okay, so first thing we want to do, we need to put the beacon on. We need to tell everybody that we're about to actually fire up the engine, I guess. I think that's the reason for that, and that things are happening. We now need to press external power to off. External power is off. Fuel pumps all on. So, there, fuel pumps are all on. Yep, happy with that. All dark. Engine mode goes to, oh my goodness, hungry. Engine mode goes to start, check. And engine 2, master on. Okay, really starting to see some action now. And if we go to the Ecam pages, which are here, we should see this engine starting to spoil up. It's always good to have a look out the window as well. We haven't done that for a while, just really to make sure that we're not actually moving. So you can see that this engine's starting to spoil up now. And what we're waiting for is the engine to get to M1 of 20% and N2 of about 60% before we fire up the second engine. So we're pretty much there now, so that's good. So Engine Master on. So we now go to the list and we can go back down here and Engine 2 on. Let's go back up to the Ecam and we should actually see, oh, what did I do there? Yeah, basically they both need to be on. So that's really what we need to do. Didn't quite do that right, but I'm sure it's going to be okay. There we go. We survived. That's good. Right, Engine Master 1 on, and now what we do is go back and switch the mode to normal. Check everything's still running. Yeah, coming up to 60% and approximately 20% on the M1s as well. So that's looking quite good. Engine mode back to normal. We are shortly to be moving this aircraft, believe it or not. It's quite the process, isn't it? So let's have a look and see where we are now in the checklist. Pre-taxi. So probes and window heat is on. So let's go back up and have a look. Probes and window heat is on, which is yes, check, that's on. Only really when it's less than 10 degrees, so we'll have that on at the moment. APU bleed is off. Check. Right, anti-icing. So basically, we need to, if it's going to be anti-icing and engines is on, I guess because it's cold, we should probably do that. And APU Master, which is here, the green one, is set to, oh sorry, the screen has moved up, is set to, APU Master is set to off. Good stuff. Right, so now we need to go down and have a look at the, let's have a look out the window, just to make sure we're not moving, because the engines are up and spoiled up now. So we need to look at the, basically the transponder. So we want to set the transponder. We'll leave that at 7,000 for now, but you would just put in the number if you've been in touch with ATC and done that as well. So we want to, transponder is set auto. Check. Transponder RPTG is set to on. Right, so that is this one here. Oh, there, and that is set to on. This is progress. Okay, now we want to go back up to the middle of the unit here, and we want to make sure that the auto brakes are, we are set on max for the braking, and anti-skid is also on. Check. Right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that the speed brake is armed. Speed brake is armed. Pitch trim. So we want to make sure, this is quite interesting, I like this because we're looking to see whether the bit we did before about putting 1.3 up. So it says 0, but what we can do, let's go to flight controls, and interestingly it's not set at 1.3 up. Now I think that's because it does it automatically, but you would want to see that as 1.3 up, and the paranoia in me suggests that that should be set to 1.3 up. So we'll set that. Now I don't think that's right, but we'll do that anyway. And then flaps we want set as 1, as we know. Flaps set 1, and perfect. We can see the flaps extending there now. Flaps are set 1, and now we've got nose light. Let's go back to the overhead panel. Nose light set to taxi. I really should have had something to eat before I started doing this. I didn't realize it would take quite so long. Runway turn light is set to on. Check. Landing lights set on. So that's those two. Right, parking brake is off. Okay, we're doing this. And we need to be on the brakes ready for this. Okay, parking brake is off, done. And we need to request the pushback, which is Shift P. And let's go outside the aircraft and just see what's going on here. Find it much better to look from above. Okay, this is good. Flight controls back into the office. And what we would now do is look at the flight control screen, and we would hope to see everything moving appropriately on the screen. Flight controls are checked and done. Weather radar is set to on. We're taxiing, folks. So on the radio then, I think we asked to steer to the left, I think, by clicking that there. There we go. So far so good. Oh, we didn't do the weather radar, did we? A bit conscious that we don't want to get caught out with just being pushed back all over the place. So weather radar is set to SIS. I think that's it. Back in the aircraft. And look above. Right, and I think we do Shift P to ask for our man to stop. No. Weather radar. Pushback stop. There you go. Might be a little bit. I think we can touch the brakes here and force that to stop so that the man actually, or person, goes away. Right, let's get back in the cockpit. So we are in the cockpit, and I'm not sure why the little truck's not moved. There he goes. Okay, back in the cockpit. So weather radar is on, taxi, and now we taxi. So, right. So, as we start to taxi, let's make our way to the runway. Okay, this is progress, I think. We are really starting to see something happen now. So hopefully this hasn't been too much. I mean, it's quite a long video, so hopefully I'll do another one once I've kind of figured out the rest of it. So at some stage, and not really sure where I'm going here, but we're just gonna head for the runway and figure it out from there. So the runway, I think, is over there. So we'll just kind of work our way along. Obviously, we're not calling for clearance or anything like that. We're just figuring out how to get this thing started and off the ground. So hopefully it's useful in some way to some people. But we are very near the end of the video now. So thanks for coming along for the ride anyway. And right, we're going to pull up there. And so we're on the brakes, press and hold. Let's go back to the checklist. So we want to do strobe lights are on. Where's strobe lights? Switch to on. Nose lights get switched to takeoff. Nose lights, which is there. Quick look out the window just to make sure we're not moving. Takeoff. We are on the brakes, and now we're going to go and oh, did we do the taxi and stuff? Just check we've done all that. Yes, we have done all that. I thought we'd miss the taxi part, but we're good. We actually followed the checklist, and it's so funny in my stomach. We're in the takeoff, and right, brakes, press and hold, and right, let's line up. Just had to check how close I was to the runway then. Right. Some of the worst taxiing I've ever done, but never mind. So check left, make sure there's nothing coming into land. We are on 27R, I think. So we're going to go straight for a rolling takeoff. Got the checklist there. So stick forward up to thrust 50%. Thrust flex MCT. Here we go. Now I wonder what I've forgotten. Okay. Now it did say 162, 163 for rotate, so we're going to stick with that because that's what it said to do. There you go, takeoff coming up, rotate. Gear is up, positive rate of climb. Rotate, positive rate of climb, landing gear is up. What we're going to do is switch straight to the autopilot and hopefully that picks us up. Autopilot on. And we've got some other stuff here. So now what we want to do is to get the throttle to climb so that will be good for the autopilot. And ladies and gentlemen, we are on our way to Madrid. Now we're not going to do the flight, of course, because that's not what we're here to do today. Now, hopefully you've enjoyed this to some extent. It's a long watch. And so let's just finish off these bits. Thrust, flaps set 1, flaps 0, and speed brake disarm. So we need to do that. Let's get back in the cockpit. And we need to do that. Speed brake is disarmed, I believe. Runway turn off lights. Let's get above here. Go back up and have a look. Runway turn off lights, which are this one here. They are off, and nose light, which is off as well. So that pretty much, come on, it should be down there. Oh, it won't go off. Why won't it go off? There we go. Nose lights off. Let's get back in the cockpit quickly just to check everything's going okay. And yeah, so that's that. And we've got the last bit of the checklist I've got so far is the climb, basically setting the nav and all those sorts of things. What we can do is have a look at, we can look at the flight plan in the MCDU, so we can jump straight down here and check the flight plan, and you can see we've got the airways as well already. And of course we would have checked this before we took off, actually, to be honest, but that's not there. Now we can see we've got no waypoints, even though we're on that. We just need to increase. There you go. You can start to see by increasing the range on the navigation display our waypoints. That's it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. It's been quite a long video, and but hopefully if it doesn't complete your learning, at least it will go somewhere towards helping you short circuit to learn how to do this. And don't forget to, if you've enjoyed this, to follow along, subscribe below, and do like the video. And any comments, if you know, I'm the first to admit this isn't complete and there's much probably to add to this, and I will change the list a bit and make the list available somehow, and also a means to download the kneeboard as well, so I'll put that down below in the description. And if you've stuck with me this far, I'm very thirsty and very hungry. It took much longer than I thought. Thanks very much for coming along for the ride. My name's Pilot Fest, and I'll see you on the next one.